over before it started. Well, I think we'll get started now. There may be other people coming to join us. So welcome, everyone. I'm Joan Pomerantz at AIA Chicago, and today you're here for the third in a series we're doing, looking at how firms across the country are putting net zero into their fundamental approach to their design work. We started out in Boston, and then we went to Kansas City, and now we're in Iowa and Minnesota. So this is terrific. We really appreciate our speakers joining us today to share the insights of their firm. And now I'm going to turn things over to Kelly Moynihan, who's part of our Environment Knowledge Community, or COAT, National COAT, Local COAT. And I will let her introduce today's speakers, and I'll disappear until later.
All right, thank you, Joan. I'd like to welcome everyone today to the, like Joan said, the third installment of our Net Zero Nation series, where we get to hear from architecture firms across the country about their pursuits to combat the climate crisis, not only in their projects, but also from within their firm cultures. The goal is to gather some key takeaways of what works and what doesn't when it comes to rooting net zero design philosophies into your firm's genetic code. This series was coordinated by AIA Chicago's COAT and 2030 Knowledge Communities, where we invited leading firms of different sizes, markets, and climates to gain a comprehensive snapshot of successes and valiant attempts at net zero design. Today, we're featuring OPN Architects. They're an award-winning architecture firm working for over 40 years with offices in Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, and Iowa City, Iowa, as well as Madison, Wisconsin, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. OPN has over 100 employees, more than 30 of which are LEED accredited professionals, and they have more than 35 LEED certified projects, making them a leader in sustainable design across the Midwest. They are 2030 signatory and strive to reduce carbon through performance-based, cultural, resiliency, and health metrics in their projects in 14 different market sectors. Joining us from OPN today are the following net zero enthusiasts. We have Tate Walker, AIA LEED Fellow, Well AP, Associate Principal and Sustainability Director, joining us in Minneapolis, as well as Danielle Hermann, AIA Principal, Joe Wallace, AIA Project Architect, Joe Feldmann, AIA LEED AP Associate Principal, all in Des Moines, Iowa. I'm really looking forward to the presentation today. We should have a little bit of time at the end for some questions, so please, everyone who's attending, feel free to enter them into the chat and we'll do our best to get to them at the end. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tate. Hi, Tate.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, everyone, for having us. We're super excited to be here. We got a bunch of OPN folks in the audience, so keep us honest in the chat, if you will. We're going to roll through these slides, but really wanted to kind of start out by understanding the audience and the demographics and what we got going on. So we developed a quick Mentimeter. I'm going to share that with you now. I think I'm sharing it with you. So, wait a second. I think I shared too quickly. I need to give you the location of the Mentimeter. I actually think this was the first time I've done this. Let's see here. Boom.
The link and the code are also in the chat for those who are able to join that way.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. I had it all up and ready to go, but apparently like fat fingers this morning, so sorry. So yeah, this is how you get there. There's a link in the chat, and you can use your phone as well. But it looks like we've got some people logged in and are starting to answer the first question. So the first question is, what responsibility do architects have to mitigate climate change? You all know buildings are responsible for 40% of carbon emissions. So carbon's a massive component of climate change. responsibility do we have? And I've probably given this to over 600 people across the United States, these questions. So it's given us a really good baseline of where Chicago is. And I can't even say that now that y'all tell me where you're from, like it's kind of all over the Midwest, which is great. But it gives us a nice snapshot for where folks are. Awesome. 29 votes, that's pretty good. I think we had 50 some odd people online. So get out your phone, get on the survey. Awesome. So the next question is, how often do you consider environmental impacts of project decisions in your practice? Rarely, sometimes, often, or always. And be honest here, it's totally anonymous. We're looking for your honest opinion. I think our goal today is to really make you feel comfortable with pushing this with inside your practice and with clients, and it can sometimes be uncomfortable. So there's just a lot of opportunity out there and a lot of stuff that the AIA is doing to support these goals, particularly COPE. So we're thrilled to be here and share some of those things and how they work in our firm. That's great. I really hope the person that said rarely is not from OPN. So how often does your firm discuss environmental impacts of project decisions with your clients? This one's a little harder. It's easy to have these conversations with your peers sometimes. Somewhat harder if and this is really telling. I would say this is not out of the ordinary from other folks I've given this presentation to. But the interesting part is the AIA has a code of ethics, right? And what it does is it says, as a member of AIA, you have a duty higher than that of just a licensed architect to talk with your clients about these environmental impacts of buildings. And that's in the canon, in the code of ethics. It's canon 6, I believe. So yeah, it's I'm not sure if folks don't know about it or they're not doing it or it needs more teeth, but it's definitely one of our ethical responsibilities. So that's always eye-opening. And then this one's a softball for you. I'm just like really kind of interested in how many folks are members of the 2030 commitment. So I was just past co-chair last year, and Chicago has been, you know, just a leader in this for a long time. I've seen pictures of the awards ceremony with everybody with their buttons on and how many years they've been a member. They really kind of help elevate the initiative. And it's been one of the most popular initiatives that I've done as a sustainability director at our firm. So it's really kind of highlight the energy process for us and thinking about it in a lot of different ways. So this is great. This is very different from what I typically see on the street. There are a lot of folks that are in the no column or considering it. I don't know, you must have been under a rock for the past 10 years not to have heard of it. what my take is like the program has grown. It's doubled over the past 2 years. So there's over 1,000 signatories now. All the big firms out there have this, and as just a matter of course, if you're in the large firm roundtable at AIA, it's a requirement. So I think it's really penetrated very deeply into practice, touching a good portion of the 100,000 or so AIA members that are out there. We still have a long ways to go, and reporting is still a challenge for us. But in terms of taking up the mantle, I just, it's a 10-year-old program, and it's still growing, which is a real testament to its resilience, and its relevancy. So one more quick question, and then we'll move on. We're doing net zero, or we're trying to. And what strategies are you using to help get there? It's not about one thing. It's not just about energy modeling, and we really want you to kind of click all the boxes here for the stuff that you're doing. Maybe there's stuff that folks haven't heard of or aren't implementing on a wide scale. This will help give us a sort of indication of what folks are doing and how much we should spend time discussing it in the presentation. This is so cool. This is interesting. All right, so from a programmatic perspective, what we've seen is a really big shift from energy into carbon over the last couple of years. And there's a lot of interest and a lot of excitement around carbon, and nobody knows what to do. So there's a huge educational component. There's a cultural change component. You wouldn't do the same things you would for energy as you would for carbon. But it is a really exciting time to be practicing right now. Similar to like when we started back in the early aughts, and everybody was signing up. Now is a great time to get re-engaged, to learn these new skills. It's happening at the strategic level at the AIA, and there are a lot of new tools and processes out there. And I'm proud to say OPN has really kind of internalized this and working towards it, even though we're taking small steps. But that's amazing. Okay. So I really appreciate your honesty and your candor, and hopefully that will set the stage for Danielle, who's up next. And let me see if I can share slides here.
Hi, everybody. So I thought I'd just start by sharing a little bit about OPN for those who may not be familiar with our firm. So we always like to start off with our why slide, which sort of embeds who we are as a group of people and what we believe in. This has been a foundation for us, and it really helps us build then towards our vision and our strategy and many of the things that we're going to talk about today, especially when we think about how we integrate design and sustainability in a way that really is tied inextricably and cannot be pulled apart. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So OPN, Kelly mentioned this, and you've had a little bit of background, but we're a little over 40 years old. I get to work with 100 plus very cool, very talented, amazing people every day. And that number is actually outdated now in 5 studio locations. Tate has just started her Minneapolis studio here not too long ago. And we're lucky enough to get to work on projects, not just regionally, but at this point all over the country, which has been really fantastic. So I talked a little bit, and you're going to hear us reference at several points throughout this presentation, how we think about embedding sustainability and design together as part of a process. And I really think one of the sort of the key messages of how we've embedded it at OPN is kind of attacking it from all angles. So it's not just from one perspective, but trying to do so from many perspectives. So we asked the question about the 2030 commitment. That's something that we were an early signatory to for Iowa, I think back when there were only 2 or 3 of us. And since we signed on, we have continuously tracked our projects. I think it's embedded in our culture at this point that we know and understand and can measure where we're at so that we can improve. And that has been, I think, a hallmark of trying to make sure that we continue that progression. We've also been honored, I think this is a result of that process, that we've been honored by our peers and others with design awards that follow that. And I think, you know, from our perspective, there's always that challenge of people saying that it's one or the other. And from our perspective, it's not. It's one cannot happen without the other. Design excellence is only achieved when it is truly integrated and truly sustainable and is taking all aspects into account. So one of the ways that we did that, and this was a real focused effort here several years ago to tie these things together and put some real meat to how we were going to do that, requirements. And I think at the end of the day, it's really about having some accountability. So accountability at a partner level for those who are leading the projects, at the project architect and the team level, and then having a clear and defined process that people could follow. So we've laid out exactly how we want people to engage in a design excellence process that hits projects at a very early stage when we still have the ability to sort of shape and mold and set a course. And then we try to make sure that we're following up with those projects as they start to get into more implementation strategies in detail. And this is really just to be able to offer thought, ask questions, make sure that they're thinking about best practices. And again, this is, I think, one piece of sort of the toolkit of how we do this. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we have at this point now required that every project go through this design excellence review process within OPN. So that gets reviewed by a small group of people that have a very targeted goal of making sure that integration is happening in these projects and that the bar continues to stay really high for the work that we do, and really challenging teams. You know, some of the tools that we're asked about in the Mentimeter and those things, I think it's not always that people don't want to do the things that they know they need to, but sometimes it falls off our radar, right? Everybody gets really busy, get into the process of doing the work. And sometimes we forget, hey, let's step back and make sure we're doing this the right way. So I think that's been a great success for us in bringing consistency to parts of the process. Go ahead. One of the other things that we do when we talk about, you know, the attacking it from all angles, part of it is cultural and how you inspire people and get them excited about all of the things that we're talking about and about dialogue around design and design excellence. So we have a yearly retreat that is an opportunity for our 5 locations to come together. And we've integrated these world-class speakers into that retreat process, but they also do a peer review of our work. So, you know, in addition to just internally reviewing and talking about how we're doing and getting better, it's been absolutely phenomenal to go to these resources that are outside of our firm and getting their feedback on where we could improve or learning from things that they're doing to advance. So, you know, Julie Snow spoke to us here this last fall. Before that, we spoke with Larry Scarpa and Marlon Blackwell, and it's been, I think, an incredible opportunity for everyone within our offices to learn from some of the people that are just really excelling in what they do.
Yeah, and I would just add really quickly, being open and transparent about what we do and sharing what we do is a really important part of, you know, bringing everyone up and doing sustainability at a much bigger level than we can do as an individual firm. So Julie, like Danielle mentioned, came to visit with us for a couple of hours, and she donated her entire honorarium to NOMA this year. So wanted to make a quick plug for that and how selfless she and her firm have been in sharing their ideas with us and trying to make us all better. So thanks.
Absolutely. So this is, again, you're going to probably hear this reference multiple times in this presentation as well, but the framework for design excellence is something else that we have embedded in our process. And part of that starts really early in projects for us. We have built a visioning and engagement process into almost every project that we do, whether that's with stakeholders, community, or everyone involved. And then we use the framework for design excellence as a way of helping set targets and goals alongside of our clients and having our design teams there with us so that everyone early on has sort of a guidepost for where they're going and understands the reason and the logic behind it. And then I think this is really fun, and I know Tate will talk about it in more detail later, but one of the things that we decided to do several years ago was say, take a hard look in the mirror and say, if we're evaluating our projects with the framework, why don't we also think about evaluating our firm as a whole with the framework? And I think this has been impactful in a number of ways, but it has, one of the most important ways is that it has given a clear focus and a clear understanding to everyone in all of our locations on where we're doing well, where there's a perception that we're doing well, but we may not be, and where we can improve. And so we use this on a yearly basis to demonstrate where we've changed, where we've evolved, but then also to target areas on any particular year where we want to grow. And I love that, as Tate referenced earlier in your Mentimeter responses, that net zero carbon is that like really challenging, nobody knows what to do with it, but that's one that we have sort of moved to the forefront and are going to be tackling as we go forward. And then I think sort of the last piece of this is embedding it in the technical details of the project itself. So again, Tate will talk in more detail about this, but the theory behind what we've done here with the sheet that goes in our drawing set is really to create a communication tool, but also to then be able to collect all of the information and the data. So one of the things that we always hear as a challenge with 2030 and other things is finding all of the information, right? And it lives in people's collectives memories and their folders on their desktop and everywhere scattered about, but pulling it all together in one place that lives in the document set has been a goal and something that I think has been really helpful. It's building a path for communication for us that allows us, again, early on, engage our entire sub-consultant team in the process and help them understand what these targets are, why we're doing them, be able to continue to communicate that with the owner, but then also, and on the backside of this, be able to talk with our contractors and say, hey, this is where all of these ideas and goals and targets came from. This is why it's important. And there's something in the drawing set that captures that and it has it kind of housed with the project for the long run. So we can always go back and see what was that, why was it there? So again, I think overall trying to think about how we can look at all the different angles from a process standpoint, an execution standpoint, and a culture standpoint has been a big part of our path forward on how to integrate sustainability within our design. With that, I think we've got a couple of really great case studies for you that I'll call the pair of Joes are going to be offering.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks everyone. And sort of to dovetail on what Danielle mentioned. So this first project for the city of West Des Moines was sort of a guinea pig for us. It was an opportunity to, I guess the project size and scale, 3,000 square feet, it's an 18 kW PV array. It allowed us to really explore and sort of beta test a lot of those strategies that Danielle mentioned earlier. So the Boathouse is it's a simple project. It's designed as a recreational amenity for the patrons of the park. It's built to be resilient from flooding. It's durable. It's low maintenance. It's all of those things that sort of a municipal client look for. But also with that, it's situated in the Raccoon River Park, which is already an amazing amenity for Central Iowa. It's an amazing natural amenity, I should say, as well. It's one of the most well-preserved ecosystems sort of in this area. So One of our goals early on was to preserve that as much as possible. So have a minimal impact on the site and the park, but generally thinking about the building footprint being minimized, the lighting being minimized. We put skylights in there, and then also the systems that we put in place. It's all electric, no gas or combustion is on site, and then not originally part of the project was the net zero portion. So it became sort of an easy sell for us to talk about energy footprint as a goal of the project. And so what I love showing this picture of the tackle box with the Swedish fish and the little kayak cookies. But bringing the public along with the story of the boathouse was a huge part of how this project came to be. So we had public and city engagement. You can kind of see down here with the parks director in front of on site with the kayak. But then also, bringing them along, telling the story. And so we showed some of these signage examples, and that was one way that we were really able to start to plant the seed of net zero in there. So we developed advocates early on, and we developed, champions for this project. So to do that, so we put, we obviously, we knew we had this seed planted. And so we wanted to design the infrastructure in place. And with that, I mean, we wanted to make sure we had standing seam roofs, something that was really easily able to accommodate a PV array. We wanted to have a large canvas that was able to consider this. And then, considering things like plug loads and winterization and things like that were sort of low-hanging fruit that made net zero achievable without really even talking about net zero, until a little bit early on. And so through that, we were able to convince the owner that if the bottom line is, if we do our job well, meaning bids come in well, net zero is an achievable goal. And ultimately we convinced them to consider PV as an add alternate to the base bid. So let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges on this project, because it wasn't without challenges, that's for sure. It was a low budget. So it was a $2 million project, and a lot of that was tied up in sort of site reclamation costs. PV was new to the owner, so this was a big one. So there was no city buildings that had PV arrays. They didn't know anything about the maintenance. They didn't know anything about the background. And so we show this picture here because there was one sort of a competing priority where the boathouse operator didn't necessarily find value in purchasing a $3,000 low, very energy efficient freezer, when they sell $1,000 worth of ice cream per year, that kind of thing. So that was one of the competing priorities. But another one being climate, winter flooding. That's a big one as well. Winterization. We talked about that. And then ultimately we didn't have the team or the budget in place to bring on a lot of specialists to be able to study this. And so we used sort of rudimentary energy modeling to prove out some of the things that we were pitching early on. And we showed, ultimately we showed certification pathways that we could look at, just consider for this. And we kind of mapped all those out early on. We looked at LEED, we looked at PEDAL, we looked at USGBC, Living Futures. Ultimately, the owner decided that they really just wanted to tell the story. They wanted to tell the story themselves, and that's by having a net zero building that they can point to, and we can look at the energy bills and have a good conversation with the public. Those dollars well spent. And then finally, the last part of this was looking at post occupancy. Tate touched on that with the Mentimeter, but this was a great experience for us, and it was a low hanging fruit for us to be able to stay involved with the project. And really, it was a chance to grade our paper. So we received access to the energy billing from the utility and the owner. I should just do a shout out. The owner loves receiving their bills because it's like $10. But this process was not straightforward or seamless. The there was a lot of hurdles involved with getting the agreements and the contracts in place and permissions to be able to have the access to that data. We did a lot of self-tracking. So what you're seeing here is our graph of our the KW delivered and then the PV PV delivered and how all that was driving. So very early on, we noticed that, hey, there's a moment here where our energy is 8 times what we were predicting it to be. And so this process gave us a chance to sort of right the ship a little bit, make small adjustments to be able to do some of those things with set points, with balancing. We noticed the heat pumps were running the whole time, and it was just a simple, it was a simple programming switch. You want to go to the next one, Tate? Yeah. So that also gave us a chance to look at the PV system in detail. So you're seeing here, we noticed we were performing below our projections a couple months here. So, why is that? And this process allowed us to identify that, hey, we have an issue. We brought it to the owner's attention. There's not a contract or anything. And ultimately, we found that, this year was a particularly windy, dusty winter. And so there was a lot of debris stuck up there. And so we were able to determine, hey, a one-time cleaning of this thing may help. And then ultimately you can maybe see the jump in the standard production of the PV panel. And then also, by tracking the panels individually here with some of the third-party software, we were able to, you can see the dark panels there were functioning. They were low functioning panels, and it could be an issue with the manufacturing process. Some panels just don't have the right efficiency right out of the gate. And so really the huge benefit to the owner was to be able to replace these panels under warranty. So we were able to catch that quickly and replace them. And then I guess, finally, to wrap it up for the Boathouse, the post-occupancy evaluation, it was extremely valuable for us. It was valuable for the owner. And really it expanded, it extended, I'll say, the role of the architect in the project. So, ultimately it saved money for the owner in the long run through energy costs, through op costs, everything. It streamlined operation of the building. It provided background data for us as we were considering our next net zero energy building. And then finally, it just maintains relationships. Like Danielle mentioned earlier, that's a huge part of what we do. So it built a level of trust. It built a level of, I'll say, vulnerability where, hey, the paper's being graded. So let's figure out a way to make it right. So we hope that I guess real quick, we hope that this project is proof that you can do sort of a net zero energy building on a tight budget without specialists, or really without initial buy-in. If you just kind of keep at it, there's a pathway for you.
Thanks, Joe. Other Joe here, and I think Joe and I are in the same office, and both of these projects were kind of in the studio at a similar time frame. And not that we were competing, but obviously there's always ways to kind of bounce ideas back and forth, right? And as you continue to learn something new on one project, we try and take it and bring it to the next project. And a lot of that hits on what Danielle and Tate were talking about earlier about that design excellence process. All starts from a few projects that try and get the ball rolling, and then we learn some stuff, and then we wrap it into the next project. And then it's for us constantly wanting to learn more to make our process better, right? Our process is not rigid, it's constantly evolving and always changing. So this project, a little bit different scale, different use, but also a public project. It originally was not meant or didn't target a net zero. However, the owner did want to bring some sustainability metrics into the project up front. They, through a little convincing, they wanted to approach LEED, and they did that in an effort to maybe expand ARP services to a point where we created additional workshops, charrettes, and those types of things that helped move that ball a little bit further and became a little bit more defined than maybe like Joe and that team had the opportunity to do. So using that COAT Top 10 framework was great for us up front, but net zero wasn't actually part of the picture right out of the gate. The best way I can describe getting to net zero and moving the ball forward is making everyone that's part of the project an advocate. And what I think we do well at OPN is that engagement piece up front. You know, before we got to pretty picture site plan diagrams and even looked at the code top 10, we talked about who the community is, what they wanted to be, and what their goals for the project were. That survey that Tate did up front is something we do with clients, but a little bit more in depth. We go through entire visioning sessions. What that puts in our back pocket is the words and goals that they generate, and then we turn them around as we move forward and trying to make design decisions, whether that's net zero, whether that's rainwater detention, whatever it might be. We're using their words and their purpose for the project to help move those goals forward. So that's a huge part of what we try and do up front is garner that buy-in from the entire community, the client. I'd like to say that this community is incredibly progressive. That's probably not the case. They're, you know, your conservative Midwestern type of town, convincing to do things like net zero and just trying to put a lot of that on top of them. And saying, hey, pick from this list is not overly impactful and usually puts you a few steps back. So using their purpose behind the project is the best way to kind of move those things forward. This project was part of a larger project. It's about a 20+ acre site in the heart of Johnston. Johnston is probably a mid-sized metro here near Des Moines, and they've never really had a town center. They've never had a community hub in their town before. It's kind of they have some large industries. Fortiva, Pioneer, their main headquarters are out of there, but they've never really had a downtown and that kind of community hub. So this project was meant to be the catalyst for that. So when I say net zero wasn't really on the target up front, it was because all these other factors were. It had to be community driven and all these other community items, and those were incredibly important. And we just helped use all of those things to help build our message throughout to get to a point where we could have conversations about net zero and the impact that that has on the community. Tate. This one's got some really great stories. No one likes cutting down trees. And there was a few advocates on council that loved some trees on site. Unfortunately, a lot of them were ash, which coming from the Midwest, we have an issue with ash borer. And we're having to take down a lot of trees, like 50 to 75-year-old trees. It's no fun. We're losing a large portion of our canopy. So we spent a bit of effort here identifying all the trees on site. We worked with a mill worker friend and tried to find ways to reuse and recapture all those existing trees on site. And we used them throughout the project, whether it was furniture items. The entire council dais was made out of the walnut from a tree on site. You'll see a few other interior images here. All those types of wood elements throughout the project were then brought on back and used within the building. So we knew we're on good ground, and it's because of that message that was created up front to be able to investigate and do some of these things. Again, this is a picture, obviously, to do net zero. There's ways to do it without making it welcoming and inviting to the community. This one was all this wood that you see here is salvaged walnut from on site. It was meant to be very kind of transparent, light and airy feeling. And that was kind of some of the priorities that they had set up for us. I think good sustainability is going to start from passive strategies, finding ways to use overhangs. In this particular project, we had the opportunity, there's a stage that was originally a separate amphitheater as part of the entire 20-acre site. We pulled it back onto the building and said, hey, why don't we actually use it as part of the building? and take that scope. So we created a stage and utilized this front porch mentality to the community with these overhangs that double as protection from weather, but also from a shading aspect as well. All the occupied spaces within this building, 100% have access to views and daylighting. That was another competing priority too. When you talk about window to wall ratio like this one, when you go inside the building and experience it, it feels like, man, there's a lot of windows. But I think we were sitting somewhere in the high 20 percentile range for window to wall ratio. So we were finding ways to get a really incredible wall system, durable materials with limestone, the reuse of wood, all those types of factors that you should create that permanence and that feel, all within the project. And everything kind of had more than one use and one purpose behind it.
Yeah, and I'll just add that this is what makes in a building an authentic reflection of place. It's not just a technical response where you load up the building with a bunch of PVs, right? So it is creating that sort of technical approach to sustainability through passive design, but it's also about design and making it a beautiful place. So
yeah. As I mentioned, the whole area is community driven. There is a ice rink and splash pad that they kind of go back and forth depending on what time of year it is. This large green space, they wanted a front lawn. They call this the yard. And the building had to become that backdrop. So how to integrate things like net zero, when I say it wasn't necessarily part of the program up front, evolved into one. The building originally was supposed to have a green roof on it. The future build out of these sites have slightly taller footprints. We didn't want to look at necessarily they weren't intrigued by the 2-story option. All right, we're a 20-some thousand square foot building. 2 stories just doesn't seem like a great use. So actually we had to give up a little bit of green roof for PV. That makes the argument even better when you're trying to argue the economics of green roof versus PV. That was a pretty easy sell. But again, their biggest thing was community driven, community face, and what does that portray back to the city of Johnston? Like I mentioned, there's lots of factors that we had used. Energy use was one of them. We had some great consultants with IMEG, so we were doing heavy commissioning, energy modeling. We had kind of all those tools, right? So whereas Joe didn't get all the tools, I was kind of sharing some stuff, but so we had the benefit of utilizing a lot of tools. The energy modeling piece was really big for us, understanding what our footprint could be. So, we pushed our use down to, I think we were just under 30 EUI was our target. And so we knew upfront what we were going to need from a PV perspective, and we had plenty of roof to do it. So we created a PV system that outweighed both the electrical use. This building was still gas. We had to use some gas elements for heat. Gas here in Iowa is super cheap. So trying to convince owners to go electric is very, very difficult. So that's a battle we're still running into today. So we turned everything from KW into KBTUs. So we would understand the total impact of the building from both a gas and electrical standpoint. And then kind of judging that net zero based on KBTUs and not just on the electric side. So I'd like to say that we are doing awesome. We have all the same tools. Joe and I work together to figure out how can we convince owners to give us their Mid-American bills and have insight on their gas use and electrical usage. Right out of the gate, we learned on this project, we were sharing some electricity. The site had been tapping into our panels. So we learned quickly by analyzing data that some of the site stuff that shouldn't have been on our panels were. So we were able to migrate those back to where they were supposed to be. But we're still trying to track things and understand certain set points. During the winter months, we're utilizing too much heat. So we're looking at different set points and how we're analyzing those things. So when we talk about those post-occupancy evaluations, those are important, but also trying to gain access to that actual usage. it's one thing, you know, we could have walked away and said, absolutely, we designed a building that was net zero. We produce way more energy than it should use based on an energy model. But I think we're open and honest with ourselves to say, hey, we're not going to always get it right. Some of it's not our fault. Some of it is, you know, it's things that are happening with the building. But if we don't put line of sight on it, it becomes very difficult to fix those things and actually achieve net zero. So this one was a fun one. We're still tracking it right now, and I'm still talking to the owner. And I think we have a real possibility to get this project down to net zero.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. So you can see it's not something that as a sustainability director you can do by yourself. You really need a great team that cares about this stuff and are going to bring their own unique skill sets to the table. So, you know, Joe Feldmann, Joe Wallace, and Danielle Hermann, they all bring like these unique skill sets, and that's what makes the process really rich. And the building's better, I think, for that. So I'm just going to
shout out to the rest of the firm too, because I mean, we have 30 plus projects right now that are trying to do these types of things. It's not just this really small team. It's constantly growing, and I think that's what's most exciting for me.
Yeah, and we don't share it enough. I think that's we don't communicate our successes or our failures enough. So this is really great to be able to do in a public way. I'm going to talk a little bit about the tools and processes and then kind of try and wrap things up and leave some time for questions really quick. But there's obviously a lot that's going on. The 2030 bit has been a great thing for us over the years, just developing energy literacy as a baseline throughout the firm. And I would hope everybody knows what an EUI is, what an LPD is, and now are starting to get into the nuance of the carbon, what a ton of carbon is, and what are the best ways of mitigating it. We use Climate Studio pretty extensively. It works really well with our design process. We have developed tools to sort of migrate Revit models directly into Rhino without a whole lot of massaging, shall we say. And tasks that once took 8 hours take 10, 20 minutes now. So it's really kind of the most successful measures have been hybrid with other teams at OPN. So we have a BIM team, we have an innovation team, and when we're partnering with HR, on social equity issues, these are the most successful initiatives and really get used. So I would definitely advocate for anything that cuts across boundaries within your firm as well. I keep coming back to this report that was put out in, I think, 2016 as just really good examples of how to work this into your culture. We use a lot of these ideas, and they're still relevant to this day. So if you haven't gotten this, go download it. It's a free download. Danielle spoke a little bit about this. The framework for design and excellence has been great for us as a laser focus for design and sustainability in our projects, but then like pointing that mirror at ourselves and see how we're doing within all these things, and either getting better or getting perhaps worse, or reevaluating ourselves. What does our staff think about how we're doing these things, and looking at potential for cross-cutting. So carbon is one of those things that cuts across, design, equitable communities in terms of transportational carbon, embodied carbon in resources and materials, certainly in energy, and in many of these other areas too. So we've really embraced post-occupancy evaluations in this past couple of years, developed our own, rolled it out on projects, and they help us not only with the hard numbers like the energy metering numbers that you saw, but with the more softer sort of experiential outcomes that we're searching for. We recently sort of partnered with Rework out of Des Moines, and they do some really interesting work around understanding the office and how it is used and how it could be better aligned with our vision and mission. So we can talk about that later too. The G sheet, which Danielle sort of mentioned, was something we stole from Snow Krylik. They had come up with this idea and shared it with us, and we've really sort of taken it in our direction where we thought we could do better. We sort of integrated and automated the Common App into this to get teams to fill it out and have it be part of the project. I mean, how many times after a project's complete does the owner come up and say, so what was all this sustainability stuff you said in design? Where is that in the project? And we can pull out the drawings and say, it's right here, And I'm still trying to figure out how to take a picture of energy. In all my years doing this, I still don't have a really good picture of that. But certainly it's orientation and massing. Window to wall ratio is a huge component that most young designers just don't have a good handle on. So making them calculate it, making it explicit and an early part of the analysis process is something super easy to do. And it can like definitely goes towards your bottom line in EUI. And we fully control it. We don't have to ask anyone for permission. So those are important criteria. So I'm going to try and really quickly summarize this. Top 10 big ideas from Jojo and Danielle. So it's looking at a holistic performance, right? It's the framework for design excellence and certainly cross-cutting measures. Developing a culture of caring, right, with your vision and leaving time and space to do these things within your work. Education is fundamental. So we bring in great speakers to elevate folks. We have a stipend to go to conferences and just make us a learning organization, develop our subject matter expertise. Talked a lot about that energy to carbon and how you wouldn't do the same things for carbon. In fact, it gives you more tools than energy to reach an aggressive goal, and certain building types can be super challenging to hit 2030 commitment. But now we have electrification, we have renewables, we have offsite renewables and RECs, and to help us kind of close that gap to get to net zero by 2030. Persistence obviously is really key, and just so many barriers get thrown up that are sometimes totally outside your control. I think it took us 4 months to get utility bills for one of these projects. I won't say which one, but yeah, it's just super important. Quick studies in-house allow us to move at the speed of a project and not have to rely on a consultant to turn around a super detailed report. You saw things are kind of rough and ready, but that's sometimes all you have time for. And then we take it back and do deeper research and build tools that help us on multiple projects when we see that opportunity. Put it in the drawings, make it explicit, communicate it with your clients, your contractors, your subcontractors, your staff, everybody. If you're not gonna put your stamp on it, you shouldn't be doing it. Be vulnerable. That's a really excellent process. You're not always going to know everything. You're going to have to rely on your consultants. You're going to have to take some chances. Just ask, your clients please not to sue you. Post-occupancy engagement. certainly the monitoring-based commissioning has been the most useful sort of development in that field that we can help facilitate and we get a lot from in our projects. And then timing, you know, don't think it's ever too late not to do something. Don't want to fall into that trap. So thank you very much. And I think we have a few minutes for questions, hopefully. And thank you to my team for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Tate, and the whole OPN team. This was really, really insightful. And I really appreciate all the efforts that you've done internally to have kind of introspect and analysis and checking in with yourselves. I was looking to see if there were any questions entered in the chat. I know we're close to time. We can go over a little bit here, but understandable if people need to leave. But seeing no questions, I guess I'd like to start with one. So you talked a lot about like these times when you're checking in, there were those 2 moments in every project where you were kind of checking on how you were doing, as well as you've got this great G sheet, which I want to steal that too, by the way, and have that in the set. But I'm curious, as a firm that has multiple studios, how are you sharing that information in an effective way to make sure that projects continue to learn from one another in real time, if that makes any sense? That's to anyone who wants to answer.
I'd love to pick on Danielle for that one, if I could.
I felt that one coming my way. You know, so I think the 2 checkpoint scenario is sort of the most formal of those checkpoints. There's also then all of the other informal. And again, that's why I think when we say, you know, come at it from all angles, and Tate's summary about persistence, and I cannot underline or highlight enough, again, the accountability aspect of it. That's how we get it to happen. So, you know, I think we used to be bashful about saying you are required to do your design excellence reviews. You are required to make sure that your G sheet is complete. You are required to, but by saying that those things are required and not being hesitant about it, that's how we've gotten it to be more embedded culturally. And so I think, you know, one of Tate mentioned also the education. We've built a very robust in-house education process through a series of workshops. And that when Tate talks about sort of the cross-cutting, putting together our innovation, our sustainability teams, and sharing those messages out on a regular basis, I think we're at a point where we've got 2 or 3 workshops pretty much every month at this point, where we're able to information share what's happening, how are we looking at the latest and greatest technology, and how is that going to impact our workflows? How are we making sure that we're learning from, if it's post-occupancy evaluations, and Tate referenced it, but didn't go into it in a lot of detail, continuing to study ourselves. We spent some time this last year doing indoor air quality assessments in each of our studios, and then sharing with everyone how those are working. That also was a great tool to be able to educate everyone in-house on what does that really mean? What does it look like to evaluate it? But then how could they speak to clients about potentially integrating that on their projects? So we've found that has all of those things kind of in combination have been really great ways to embed information, but also share information and make sure it's happening in all studios.
Yeah, I would just say there was no silver bullet to it. There was not like one thing and then we did it. That's awesome. It's a constant thing that happens. We're even trying to evolve our learning process right now. How do we get stuff to staff on a as needed basis, right? It's one thing to sit in a climate studio innovation workshop and then not touch it for like 6 months. So for us, we do a good job of rolling the things out, but we're constantly trying to get better about how do we continue to provide access to these learning opportunities when they need it. Because we can do things all day long and roll them out, but if you can't circle back with people right when they need it, they're just not going to do it.
I guess I just have one last question that I'll ask, because again, I'm not seeing any in the chat, and it's sort of the Hollywood question of what's next for OPN? What next challenge do you hope to take on? What are you interested in? I don't know, just give us something fun and exciting to leave with. That'll go to Tate.
Okay. Well, so what I'm most exciting about is starting a new office. That's kind of a challenge for me in a different way. But we have undertaken developing a strategic plan for the organization, and it's super exciting with performance as at the center of it. So there are going to be a lot of big changes at the firm, and I would say built on these last 8 years of information that we've gotten from staff, from successful initiatives and from failures as well. And we've really gotten to see what works and what works in our market and what works for us. And I would say sometimes it's not about, aiming your fire hose and doing a 180, right? It's more of a subtle shift. And really, you have an incredible amount of control with just 2 or 3 degrees of change. And that's what I'm really interested in right now. And with a big firm with 100+ people and 5 offices, it's a challenge. It's a big battleship. But I also think, looking back, the last years have been really exciting, and we've developed a lot of stuff in-house that we've shared widely throughout the Institute. Lately, I have been working on the Minnesota Governor's Climate Action Plan, and last year, with some colleagues, we developed sustainability guidelines for the University of Wisconsin in Madison and for the state. So any facility that gets public funding has to meet these sustainability guidelines. And guess what? They're based on the framework for design excellence. So if your clients are asking for this, there is no reason you can't deliver it. And that's super exciting. This advocacy piece is really helping us, up our own game on every project.
Very exciting. Well, I think I'm going to wrap it up. I really want to thank all of you for sharing your story today. This was really inspiring. And I think I've taken some things away that I want to now bring home to where I work. And I hope everybody else is thinking the same way. So we really appreciate your time, and congrats on all the great work that you've been doing.
I want to add my thanks as well for you. We will have a link to a recording of this program, and we will let everybody know when that's ready. So, last word from the OPN team?
Just going to say thank you so much for having us. We really enjoyed it.
Good. Well, again, maybe we'll see you in June here in Chicago. And if not, we'll run into you in another forum. So thanks everybody who's still with us for coming today, and keep working on these things. See you soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.